She walked into the Whitmore mansion with nothing but love in her heart, but they saw only the color of her skin, not the strength of her character or the depth of her devotion. What Naomi Carter didn't know was that Margaret Whitmore had already decided to destroy her relationship with Ethan, using every weapon in her arsenal of wealth and privilege to tear them apart. When the whispers turned to outright humiliation and the family ultimatum was delivered, Ethan faced the most devastating choice of his privileged life, his birthright, or the woman who made his soul come alive. No one expected Charles Whitmore to break ranks with his wife after 30 years of marriage, just as no one anticipated the shocking moment when Naomi walked out before dawn, leaving nothing but a tear-stained note on her pillow. The stunning twist that follows will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, family, and what truly makes someone belong. Hit subscribe right now and drop a comment telling me if you've ever had to choose between love and family, because this story might just help you heal from wounds you didn't know you still carried. Naomi Carter's hands trembled as she gazed up at the Whitmore mansion. It loomed ahead like something from a movie, all white stone and perfect gardens, with windows that gleamed in the afternoon sun. "It's huge," she whispered, tugging at the sleeve of her blue dress. She'd bought it special for this weekend, spending way more than she should have. Now she wondered if it was good enough. Ethan Whitmore squeezed her hand. His touch was warm and steady, just like always. "Hey," he said softly. "You look amazing. And they're going to love you." Naomi tried to smile. She'd been dating Ethan for 6 months, the best 6 months of her life. But meeting his family, that was a whole different kind of scary. What if they don't? She couldn't help asking. Ethan's eyes, bright blue like a clear summer sky, locked with hers. "Then that's their problem, not ours." The car rolled to a stop in front of massive iron gates. A guard stepped out of a small booth and peered through the window. His eyes moved from Ethan to Naomi, then back to Ethan. Something flickered across his face. "Welcome home, Mr. Whitmore," the guard said. But his gaze lingered on Naomi a moment too long. Ethan nodded politely as the gate swung open. "Thanks, Frank." As they drove up the winding driveway, Naomi noticed 2 maids whispering on the front steps. They stopped when they saw the car, their faces suddenly blank. "They're staring," Naomi murmured. "They stare at everyone," Ethan said. But his grip on the steering wheel tightened. The car came to a stop at the foot of wide marble steps. A man in a crisp uniform appeared to open Naomi's door. "Welcome, miss," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. Naomi stepped out, smoothing her dress. "Thank you." Ethan came around and took her hand again. "Ready?" he asked quietly. No, she wasn't ready. But she nodded anyway. The massive front doors opened and light spilled out. Music and voices drifted from inside. Naomi took a deep breath as Ethan led her up the steps. "Remember," he whispered, "I love you." They stepped into a grand entryway with a ceiling that soared 3 stories high. A crystal chandelier hung above them, sparkling like stars. Marble floors gleamed beneath their feet, and everywhere people turned to stare. Men in expensive suits and women dripping with jewels paused their conversations. Wine glasses froze halfway to lips. Eyes widened, narrowed, or looked quickly away. Naomi felt her chest tighten. She'd known this would be hard, but the weight of all those stares made it hard to breathe. A tall woman with silver-streaked blonde hair broke from the crowd. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Ethan, darling," she said, air-kissing his cheek. "You're finally here." "Mother," Ethan said, his voice tight but polite. "This is Naomi Carter." "Naomi, this is my mother, Margaret Whitmore." Margaret's eyes swept over Naomi like she was checking for dust on a shelf. "How interesting. Welcome, Miss Carter." "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Whitmore," Naomi said, extending her hand. "Your home is beautiful." Margaret barely touched Naomi's fingers before dropping them. "Yes, well, do come in properly. Everyone's been waiting." As they followed Margaret deeper into the mansion, a young woman with the same blonde hair as Ethan appeared. Her smile was sharp as a knife. "So this is her," she said, looking Naomi up and down. "I'm Sophie, Ethan's sister." "Nice to meet you," Naomi said, trying to keep her voice steady. Sophie fingered the sleeve of Naomi's dress. "That's an unusual choice for a Whitmore gathering. Where did you find it? Some boutique I haven't heard of?" Ethan stiffened beside her. "Sophie, it's from Nordstrom," Naomi said simply. "I liked the color." Sophie smiled wider. "Of course you did. It's so bright." She turned to a nearby woman and whispered something that made them both laugh. Ethan's arm went around Naomi's waist. "Let's get a drink," he muttered, guiding her toward a table laden with crystal glasses. "Your sister doesn't like me," Naomi whispered. "Sophie doesn't like anyone except herself," Ethan replied, handing her a flute of champagne. "Don't let her get to you." But it wasn't just Sophie. As they moved through the crowded room, Naomi felt eyes following her everywhere. Conversation stopped when they approached, only to start again in hushed tones when they passed. A man with Ethan's jawline but harder eyes approached them. "His suit probably cost more than Naomi's car." "Son," he said, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. "Good to see you." His gaze shifted to Naomi. "And this must be your friend." "Father, this is Naomi Carter," Ethan said firmly. "My girlfriend." "Naomi, this is my father, Charles Whitmore." Charles extended his hand. His grip was cool and firm. "Miss Carter, Ethan has been quite mysterious about you." "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Whitmore," Naomi said. Before Charles could respond, Margaret appeared at his side. "Dinner is served," she announced. "Ethan, you and your guest will sit at the family table, of course." The dining room was even grander than the entryway. A table that could seat 30 stretched beneath another crystal chandelier. Silver gleamed on crisp white linens. Candles flickered in ornate holders. Naomi was seated between Ethan and a stern-looking older woman who barely acknowledged her presence. Sophie sat directly across, her eyes never leaving Naomi's face. "So, Naomi," Margaret called from the head of the table as servers placed delicate plates of food before each guest. "Ethan tells us you work in, what was it again?" "I'm an elementary school teacher," Naomi replied. "3rd grade. How quaint," Sophie said. "Teaching little children their ABCs. "It's more than that," Naomi began. "We focus on critical thinking and how did you and Ethan meet?" Margaret interrupted. "He's been so secretive." Ethan reached for Naomi's hand under the table. "We met at the park. I was there with Rex and he got away from me. Ran right up to Naomi." Naomi smiled at the memory. "His dog decided I needed to meet him, I guess. Rex always did have questionable taste," Sophie murmured, just loud enough to hear. Charles cleared his throat. "Sophie," Margaret tapped her glass with a silver spoon. "I'd like to propose a toast," she announced, lifting her wine glass. "To family and tradition, to the Whitmore legacy, and to those who uphold our values." Everyone raised their glasses, everyone except Naomi, who noticed Margaret had pointedly looked away from her during the toast. Ethan's hand squeezed hers harder under the table. "Now, Miss Carter," Margaret continued, "do tell us about your background. Where does your family come from?" The table went quiet. Naomi felt every eye on her. "My parents are both from Chicago," she said calmly. "My father works in construction management, and my mother is a nurse at Memorial Hospital. I grew up in Oak Park. And before Chicago?" Margaret pressed. "Your ancestry, dear." Naomi met Margaret's gaze directly. "My father's family has been in America since before the Civil War. My mother's parents came from Jamaica in the 1960s. Her voice remained steady. "I'm proud of all parts of my heritage, Mrs. Whitmore." A few guests nodded in approval. One older gentleman at the far end even smiled. Charles Whitmore studied Naomi with new interest. He gave a slight nod, so brief she almost missed it. Margaret's smile tightened. "How diverse." The conversation moved on, but Naomi noticed how Margaret controlled it, cutting Naomi off whenever she tried to join in. The dishes came and went, each more elaborate than the last, but Naomi barely tasted any of it. By the time dessert arrived, Naomi's cheeks hurt from forcing smiles. She excused herself to find the restroom, grateful for a moment alone. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. "Tough crowd, huh?" Naomi turned to find a tall man with kind eyes smiling at her. He extended his hand. "Daniel Reed, Ethan's friend since forever. And you must be the famous Naomi he won't stop talking about." Naomi shook his hand, relieved by his warm smile. "Nice to meet you, Daniel. And yes, it's been interesting." "Don't let the Whitmores intimidate you," Daniel said. "Their bark is worse than their bite." "Well, except for Sophie. Her bite is exactly as bad as advertised." That made Naomi laugh for the first time that evening. "Seriously, though," Daniel continued, "Ethan's different from them. Always has been, and I've never seen him this happy." He glanced back toward the dining room. "They're not playing fair, but don't let that shake you. Thank you, Naomi said, genuinely touched. It helps to know he has friends like you. When they returned to the dining room, Ethan immediately found her side. Everything okay? He whispered. Better now, she said, grateful for Daniel's unexpected kindness. As the evening wore on, Naomi felt herself growing tired from the constant tension. When Ethan suggested they get some air, she nearly sighed with relief. The garden behind the mansion was a wonderland of perfectly trimmed hedges and blooming flowers. Stone pathways wound between fountains that sparkled in the moonlight. "I'm sorry about them," Ethan said once they were alone, "especially my mother and Sophie." "You don't need to apologize for your family," Naomi said, though part of her wished he'd stood up for her more during dinner. "Yes, I do," he insisted. "The way they treated you wasn't right." "I should have said something." Naomi looked up at the stars so bright away from city lights. "I knew this wouldn't be easy. I'm not from your world, Ethan." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You're part of my world now." "The most important part." His eyes searched hers. "Are you having second thoughts about us?" "No," she said honestly. "But I wonder if you might once you see how hard this will be." "Your family clearly doesn't approve." "I don't care if they approve," Ethan interrupted. "I love you. Not them. You say that now, but I'll always choose you," he said fiercely. "Always, no matter what." His words warmed something deep inside her. Standing on tiptoe, she kissed him softly. Under the stars, with his arms around her, Naomi could almost believe everything would be okay. That love really could conquer all, even the deep divides of race and class that stretched between them. But as Ethan led her back toward the mansion, where light spilled from tall windows and the murmur of voices waited, doubt crept back into her heart. What she didn't see was Sophie watching from an upstairs window, her face twisted with anger. She turned away sharply, already planning what to tell their mother. Inside the mansion, in a wood-paneled study, Margaret Whitmore paced before a large fireplace. "It's worse than I feared, Charles. The way he looks at her, she seems like a respectable young woman," Charles replied, swirling brandy in a crystal glass. "Well-spoken, poised. She's completely wrong for him," Margaret snapped. "Can you imagine her at the club? At the charity gala? She'd be a spectacle," Charles sighed. "Times are changing, Margaret. Not in our circle, they're not," she replied coldly. "I won't have Ethan throw away his future, his inheritance, for some passing fancy." "Is that what you think she is?" Charles asked quietly. Margaret's eyes hardened. "She won't last the weekend." "I'll make sure of it." Back in their guest room, separate rooms at Margaret's insistence, Naomi slipped out of her dress and into comfortable pajamas. The room was beautiful, all antiques and silk, but it felt cold somehow, unwelcoming. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "It's me," Ethan called softly. She opened the door to find him leaning against the frame, tie gone, shirt partly unbuttoned. He looked tired but smiled when he saw her. "I just wanted to check on you before bed," he said. "You were quiet on the way back from the garden." "I'm okay," she said, not entirely truthfully. "Just tired." "It's been a long day." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Tomorrow will be better. We'll go riding in the morning. Get away from everyone for a while." "I've never been on a horse," Naomi admitted. Ethan grinned. "Then I'll teach you." "I'm a great teacher." She couldn't help smiling back. When it was just the two of them, everything felt so right, so easy. He kissed her gently. "Sweet dreams, Naomi. I love you." "I love you too," she whispered as he pulled away. Watching him walk down the hallway to his own room, Naomi felt both longing and fear twist inside her. Loving Ethan was the easy part. It was everything else, his family, their world, the weight of all that wealth and privilege, that terrified her. As she slipped between silk sheets, Naomi wondered if their love was strong enough to withstand what the weekend would bring. Ethan had promised to always choose her, but when faced with losing his family, his inheritance, his entire way of life, would that promise hold? Tomorrow would test them both in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Morning sunlight streamed through silk curtains, waking Naomi with its gentle warmth. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The mansion, the stairs, the cutting remarks thinly disguised as polite conversation. She sat up, hugging her knees to her chest. Yesterday had been hard, but Ethan had promised today would be better. Just the two of them, riding horses far from judging eyes and whispered comments. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Miss Carter. A maid's voice. Breakfast will be served on the terrace in 30 minutes. Mrs. Whitmore requests everyone's presence. So much for escaping. Thank you, Naomi called. I'll be down soon. She showered quickly in the marble bathroom, bigger than her entire apartment bedroom. Opening her suitcase, she chose a simple yellow sundress, bright and cheerful, like armor against the coldness of the Whitmore family. The hallway outside her room was quiet as she made her way downstairs. She paused at a large family portrait hanging in the main stairwell. The Whitmores stared back at her, Ethan younger and more serious, Sophie smirking, Margaret and Charles stern and proud. They looked perfect, untouchable, intimidating, aren't they? Naomi turned to find Daniel smiling at her, coffee mug in hand. Good morning, she said, grateful to see a friendly face. And yes, a little. The secret is, Daniel stage whispered, they want to be intimidating. It's how they keep people in line. He nodded toward the terrace doors. Ready for round two? Naomi took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. The terrace overlooked perfectly manicured gardens. A long table had been set with fine china and silver, fresh flowers in crystal vases catching the morning light. Margaret sat at the head, Charles at the foot. Sophie was already there, sipping orange juice and pretending not to watch Naomi's entrance. But no Ethan. Miss Carter, Margaret said with a tight smile. How did you sleep? Very well, thank you, Naomi replied, taking the empty seat beside Daniel. Your guest rooms are lovely, Margaret nodded stiffly. Ethan is checking on the horses. He'll join us shortly. Sophie leaned forward. So, Naomi, Ethan tells us you grew up in, what was it, Oak Park? That's right, Naomi said, accepting coffee from a silent server. How quaint, Sophie said, the same word she'd used about Naomi's job. I've never been to that part of town. You should visit sometime, Naomi replied evenly. It's a beautiful neighborhood. Great restaurants, friendly people. Sophie's smile didn't reach her eyes. I'll pass, thanks. More guests filtered onto the terrace, friends of the family, Naomi guessed. Their curious glances made her skin prickle. She focused on her coffee, wishing Ethan would hurry. As if summoned by her thoughts, he appeared, wind-blown and smiling. He wore riding clothes, boots, tan pants, a light blue shirt that matched his eyes. Seeing him sent a wave of relief through Naomi. Morning, everyone, he called cheerfully, moving straight to Naomi's side. He kissed her cheek, a public display that made Margaret's lips thin. Sleep well? Yes, Naomi said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Ready for my first riding lesson? Margaret set down her cup with a sharp clink. Oh, but we've planned a lovely brunch, Ethan. All your old friends are coming. You can't possibly miss it, Ethan frowned. You didn't mention a brunch yesterday, didn't I? Margaret's surprise seemed rehearsed. It must have slipped my mind. But everyone's so eager to meet your Naomi. The way she hesitated before saying Naomi's name made it clear what she thought of her son's choice. Ethan's jaw tightened. We were planning to ride. The horses will still be there this afternoon, Charles interrupted. Your mother has gone to considerable trouble. Naomi touched Ethan's arm. It's okay. We can ride later. He looked frustrated but nodded. Fine, but we're leaving right after brunch. Margaret's smile was all victory. Wonderful. An hour later, the terrace was crowded with people in expensive clothes, all talking too loudly and laughing too hard. Naomi stood beside Ethan as he introduced her to faces she knew she'd never remember. Old school friends, business associates, neighbors. Most were polite but distant. A few were openly curious. One older woman in pearls actually reached out and touched Naomi's hair without asking. So fascinating, the woman murmured. Is this your natural texture? Before Naomi could answer, Margaret appeared, taking her by the arm. Everyone, she announced, her voice carrying across the terrace. I'd like to properly introduce my son's guest. The crowd quieted, all eyes turning to Naomi. She felt like an animal in a zoo. This is Naomi Carter, Margaret continued. She's a teacher from Oak Park. Naomi, perhaps you could tell everyone how you and Ethan met. Ethan stepped closer to Naomi. Mother, we already covered this at dinner. But not everyone was there, darling, Margaret said sweetly. I'm sure Naomi doesn't mind. Put on the spot, Naomi forced a smile. Ethan's dog introduced us, she said. At Lincoln Park, Rex ran straight to me and Ethan had to follow. How adorable, someone said, not kindly. And your parents? Margaret pressed. What do they do, dear? Naomi kept her voice steady. My father is in construction management, and my mother is a nurse. Hard-working people, Margaret said in a tone that suggested this was somehow unfortunate. And what do they think of you dating a Whitmore? The question hung in the air, its real meaning clear to everyone. What do your black parents think of you dating a rich white man? Naomi felt heat rise in her cheeks. They think I'm dating Ethan, not his last name, she said quietly. They raised me to judge people by their character, not their bank account. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others looked away. But Daniel, standing near the back, gave her a small nod of approval. Margaret's smile hardened. How progressive of them. I think that's enough questions, Mother, Ethan said firmly, taking Naomi's hand. Naomi isn't here for an interview, but Margaret wasn't finished. Just one more thing, she said, her voice honey-sweet with poison underneath. Naomi, since you're an educator, perhaps you'd like to give us a little toast about family values. I'm sure you have thoughts on the matter. It was a trap and Naomi knew it. Say nothing, and she'd seem rude. Say the wrong thing and they'd judge her even more harshly. She glanced at Ethan, who looked ready to argue with his mother. But something inside Naomi, some quiet strength she'd always had but rarely needed, rose to the surface. I'd be happy to, she said, surprising everyone, including herself. She took the champagne glass Ethan handed her, stood a little straighter, and looked around at the sea of privileged faces. To me, family values are simple, she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. Kindness, respect, accepting people for who they are, not what they have or where they come from. She paused, meeting Margaret's cold stare. True family stands by you when others walk away. They lift you up instead of putting you down. They make room at the table instead of making you feel you don't belong there. The terrace was completely silent now. Naomi took a breath and continued. I was raised to believe that family isn't just about blood or background. It's about love. The kind that's patient and brave enough to cross any boundary. She raised her glass. So here's to love that's bigger than fear, stronger than judgment, and truer than appearances. She finished speaking, suddenly aware of how bold she'd been. But before doubt could take hold, she heard it, a soft tapping of glass. Daniel was the first, then an older gentleman in the corner, then a young woman near the railing. Soon scattered applause broke the silence. Margaret's face flushed with anger or embarrassment, maybe both. Sophie looked like she'd swallowed something sour. But Charles Whitmore was watching Naomi with something new in his eyes. Not quite approval, but something close to respect. Ethan squeezed her hand, pride written all over his face. That, he whispered, was amazing. For one bright moment, Naomi felt she'd won something important. She locked eyes with Ethan, drawing strength from his smile. But the moment couldn't last. As the crowd broke into smaller groups, Sophie cornered them, her smile sharp as broken glass. Quite the speech, she said to Naomi. Did you practice it in front of your classroom mirror? Ethan stepped between them. That's enough, Sophie. Oh, I'm just getting started, Sophie replied, her voice low enough that only they could hear. You know Mother's furious, right? She called some of these people specially to meet your little experiment. Watch it, Ethan warned, his face darkening. Sophie ignored him, her eyes fixed on Naomi. You think you're so special because my brother picked you. But you're not the first charity case he's brought home. Sophie. Ethan snapped. Naomi put a hand on his arm. It's okay, she said quietly. I can handle this, Sophie smirked. Can you? Because Mother's not the only one who thinks you're all wrong for Ethan. Everyone does. They're just too polite to say it to your face. Her words stung, but Naomi refused to show it. Is that why you're saying it? Because you're not polite. Sophie's eyes narrowed. So I'm saying it because someone needs to. Before this goes any further, she looked at her brother. You can't be serious about her, Ethan. It's one thing to date outside your circle. It's another to throw away everything for it. Ethan's face was hard as stone now. You don't get to decide who I love, love. Sophie laughed, the sound brittle as thin ice. Please, this is just another of your rebellions. Like when you wanted to be a photographer instead of joining the family business. Naomi looked at Ethan, surprised. He'd never mentioned wanting to be a photographer. Sophie saw her reaction and smiled. Oh, did he not tell you about that? There's probably a lot he hasn't shared. She turned back to Ethan. Mother wants to see you alone in Father's study. With that, she glided away, leaving tension thick in the air between them. What was that about photography? Naomi asked quietly. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. It was a long time ago. I wanted to pursue it professionally after college. My parents disagreed, so you gave it up. I had to, he said, not meeting her eyes. Some battles aren't worth fighting. His words sent a chill through her. If he'd given up his passion so easily, what else might he surrender when pushed hard enough? You should go talk to your mother, Naomi said, trying to keep the worry from her voice. I'll be fine here, Ethan hesitated. I don't want to leave you alone with these people. I'm tougher than I look, she said, forcing a smile. Go. The sooner you deal with her, the sooner we can get out of here. He kissed her forehead. I'll be quick, promise? Naomi watched him disappear into the house, fighting the urge to follow. Instead, she found a quiet corner of the terrace and tried to look invisible. It didn't work. You've certainly stirred things up, Daniel said, appearing beside her with 2 fresh glasses of champagne. He offered her one. That was some toast. Too much, she asked, accepting the drink gratefully. Just enough, he replied. The Whitmores aren't used to being challenged, especially not Margaret. Naomi sipped her champagne, watching guests mingle. No one approached her now that Ethan was gone. I don't understand why she hates me so much. She doesn't even know me. It's not personal, Daniel said. At least not entirely. Margaret spent Ethan's whole life planning his future. The right schools, the right career, the right wife from the right family. He shook his head. You're a threat to all of that. Because I'm black. Daniel didn't sugarcoat it. That's part of it. But it's also because you're independent, strong, not easily controlled. He smiled. Margaret can spot a backbone from a mile away and she hates them. Naomi laughed despite herself. Great, so I was doomed from the start. Not doomed, Daniel corrected. Just facing an uphill battle. His expression grew serious. The question is whether Ethan's ready for that battle. He talks big, but he's never really stood up to them before. Not when it counted. Inside the house, in Charles Whitmore's wood-paneled study, Ethan faced his mother across a massive desk. This has gone far enough, Margaret said, pacing like a caged tiger. That display out there was completely inappropriate. You mean when you put Naomi on the spot and she handled it with grace? Ethan countered. I thought her toast was perfect. Margaret stopped pacing, her eyes cold. You can't seriously be considering a future with this girl. Her name is Naomi, Ethan said through gritted teeth. And yes, I am. She'll never fit into our world, Ethan, you know that. Maybe I don't care about our world as much as you think I do. Margaret's laugh was sharp. Don't be naive. You enjoy your comfortable life, your trust fund, your position at the company. All of that comes with responsibilities. Ethan's hands curled into fists. Are you threatening to cut me off? I'm reminding you what's at stake, Margaret said, her voice dangerously soft. If you continue this relationship, there will be consequences. Financial consequences, social consequences, family consequences. You can't be serious, dead serious, she replied. Your father agrees with me. Ethan doubted that, but didn't argue the point. So that's it? I choose between the woman I love and my family? My inheritance? It doesn't have to be a choice, Margaret said, her tone softening slightly. End this now before it gets messier, before real feelings are hurt. She'll understand deep down she must know this can't work. Ethan stared at his mother, anger and disbelief warring inside him. You don't know her at all. And you do? After what, 6 months? Please. Margaret moved closer, placing a hand on his arm. I'm trying to protect you both from bigger heartache down the road. Outside in the hallway, Naomi had gone looking for a bathroom, and maybe for Ethan, though she wouldn't admit that to herself. As she passed the study door, left slightly ajar, she heard Margaret's voice, clear and cold. He'll be disowned if he continues this relationship. Naomi froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. You can't do that, Ethan's voice replied. But it sounded uncertain. We can and we will, Margaret said firmly. The choice is yours. Feeling sick, Naomi backed away from the door. She couldn't hear Ethan's response, didn't want to hear it. The walls of the grand hallway seemed to close in around her as she hurried back toward the terrace, her vision blurring with unshed tears, disowned, cut off from his family, His inheritance, everything he'd grown up with. Because of her. Back in her room, Naomi sat on the edge of the bed trying to steady her breathing. She'd known this weekend would be hard, but she hadn't expected to come between Ethan and his family like this, to be the reason he might lose everything. A soft knock at the door made her quickly wipe her eyes. "Who is it?" "It's me," Ethan called. "Can I come in?" She opened the door to find him looking tired and tense. "Hey," she said, trying to sound normal. "How did it go with your mother?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Not great, but I don't want to talk about her right now." He took Naomi's hands in his. "I want to get out of here. Just us, like I promised." "Ethan," she hesitated, not sure how to ask if he'd been given an ultimatum, if he'd made his choice. "What's wrong?" he asked, brow furrowing. "You look upset." Naomi pulled her hands away. "I heard your mother," she said quietly. "Outside the study. She threatened to disown you if you stay with me." Ethan's face fell. "Naomi, it's not—" "Don't say it's not what I think," she interrupted. "I heard her clearly. She's making you choose between me and everything you've ever known." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "It doesn't matter what she says. I choose you, but at what cost?" Naomi asked. "Your family. Your inheritance? Your whole life?" "None of that matters without you," he insisted. But she saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the hesitation. "It does matter," she said softly. "Maybe not today or tomorrow, but someday you'll resent me for being the reason you lost it all." "That's not true," Ethan said, reaching for her again. Naomi stepped back, needing space to think clearly. "I need some time alone," she said. "Please." He looked like he wanted to argue, but nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll be in my room when you're ready to talk." At the door he paused. "I meant what I said in the garden. I'll always choose you, Naomi. Always." After he left, Naomi sank onto the bed, doubt gnawing at her heart. She wanted to believe him. But the stakes were so much higher now than she'd realized. Evening came, casting long shadows through her window. A knock at the door roused her from troubled thoughts. "Dinner will be served in 30 minutes, Miss Carter," a maid called. "Thank you," Naomi replied automatically. The thought of facing the Whitmores again made her stomach twist. She changed into a simple black dress, the safest choice in her suitcase, and headed downstairs. The mansion seemed quieter now, most of the brunch guests gone. In a dimly lit hallway, Sophie stepped out from a doorway, startling her. "There you are," she said, smiling coldly. "Hiding away all afternoon? Smart move." Naomi tried to step around her. "Excuse me." Sophie blocked her path. "Not so fast. I wanted to have a little chat, just us girls." Something in her tone made Naomi's skin crawl. "I need to get to dinner." "This won't take long," Sophie said, leaning against the wall. "I just thought you should know what you're really getting into with my brother." Against her better judgment, Naomi stopped. "What do you mean?" Sophie's smile widened. "Ethan's a wonderful person, so uncharitable, always trying to save someone or something." Her voice dripped with fake sweetness. "Last year it was endangered tigers. Before that, climate refugees. And now—" She gestured at Naomi. "Well, you get the idea." Anger flashed through Naomi. "I'm not one of his causes, aren't you? The struggling teacher from the wrong side of town. The girl who needs to be rescued from her ordinary life." Sophie examined her perfect manicure. "He'll get bored eventually. They always do. And when he does, he'll regret throwing away his future for a passing phase." "You don't know anything about us," Naomi said, her voice shaking slightly. "I know my brother," Sophie countered. "And I know he'll resent you when he realizes what he's lost. The connections, the opportunities, the legacy." Her eyes hardened. "He'll wake up one day in your tiny apartment with your ordinary life, and he'll hate you for it." Each word hit like a physical blow, feeding the doubts already growing in Naomi's mind. But something inside her, that same quiet strength from before, refused to be beaten down. "You're wrong about him," she said firmly. "And you're wrong about me. I don't need to be rescued, and I don't need your approval. Neither does Ethan." Sophie's mask of politeness slipped, revealing the ugliness beneath. "You think you're so special because you gave a pretty speech, because a few people clapped." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You'll never belong here, never, and deep down you know it." Before Naomi could respond, Sophie stalked away, disappearing around a corner. Naomi stood frozen, Sophie's words echoing in her head. The worst part wasn't the cruelty. It was the tiny grain of truth they contained. She didn't belong in this world of wealth and privilege. Maybe she never would. And maybe someday Ethan would realize that too. Dinner was a tense affair, with Margaret coldly polite and Sophie smirking whenever their eyes met. Charles was oddly quiet, watching everything but saying little. Ethan tried to keep conversation flowing, but his strained smile told Naomi how hard he was working at it. She picked at her food, appetite gone. Every minute in this house felt like drowning in slow motion. When dessert was finally served, Naomi excused herself, claiming a headache. It wasn't entirely a lie. Her head was pounding from the stress of the day. Back in her room, she stood at the window, looking out at the vast, perfectly maintained grounds. Everything here was perfect, controlled, exactly as the Whitmores wanted it, except her. A soft tap at the door announced Ethan. When she opened it, he looked worried. "Are you okay?" He asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Just tired," she said, not meeting his eyes. "It's more than that." He took her hands, forcing her to look at him. "Talk to me, Naomi, please." The concern in his eyes nearly broke her. "I don't think I can do this," she whispered. "Do what?" "This," she gestured vaguely. "Us, your family, everything." Ethan's face fell. "Don't say that. We can figure this out, can we? Your mother wants to disown you. Your sister hates me. This whole weekend has been one long nightmare." The words tumbled out faster now. "And the worst part is, maybe they're right. Maybe we are kidding ourselves. They're not right," Ethan insisted, pulling her closer. "I love you. That's all that matters." "Is it?" Naomi asked softly. "What about when you have to choose between me and everything you've ever known? What happens then?" "I already told you—" "You said you'd choose me," she interrupted. "But I saw your face when we talked about it. I saw the doubt, Ethan." He flinched like she'd slapped him. "That's not fair, isn't it? You couldn't even stand up to your mother at brunch when she was putting me on display like some exotic pet." Tears filled her eyes. "And I get it. This is your family. But I can't be the reason you lose them." "You're not making any sense," Ethan said, frustration edging his voice. "First you're upset because you think I won't choose you, and now you're upset because you don't want me to have to choose at all." "Yes," Naomi cried, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "Because either way this ends badly for us. Either you resent me for costing you your family, or I resent you for not standing up for me when it mattered." Ethan stepped back, hurt written across his face. "I thought you believed in us more than this." "So did I," she whispered. "But I can't fight your whole family and their world. It's too much. So you're giving up? Just like that?" His words stung because they contained a truth she didn't want to face. Was she giving up too easily? Or was she being realistic about a relationship doomed from the start? "I need to think," she said finally. "Alone, please." Ethan looked like he wanted to argue, but nodded stiffly. "Fine, we'll talk in the morning." At the door, he paused. "I meant what I said, Naomi. I love you. That hasn't changed." After he left, Naomi sat on the edge of the bed, tears flowing freely now. Everything was falling apart, and she didn't know how to fix it, or if it could be fixed at all. As the mansion grew quiet around her, a decision formed in her mind. The only decision that made sense, even as it broke her heart. In the grey light before dawn, Naomi packed her suitcase with quiet efficiency. She wrote a note on mansion stationery, her tears smudging the ink slightly. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I can't be the reason you lose your family. And I can't stay where I'm not wanted. Please don't follow me. This is for the best. I'll always love you." Naomi, she placed it on her pillow, took one last look around the beautiful room that had never felt welcoming, and slipped out the door. The mansion was silent as she made her way downstairs, past the family portraits and crystal chandeliers, past all the symbols of a world she'd never belong in. Outside, the air was cool and fresh. The sun hadn't yet risen. Naomi called a car service on her phone, dragging her suitcase down the long driveway to the gates where she could meet the driver. As she waited, she looked back at the Whitmore mansion, grand and imposing against the lightening sky. For a brief, beautiful moment, she'd believed love could conquer all the differences between them, that she and Ethan could build something that transcended family expectations and social boundaries. Now she knew better. When the car arrived, Naomi got in without looking back again. Her heart felt like it was shattering inside her chest, but she kept her head high, her back straight. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Ethan had said about his photography dreams. Maybe loving him was a battle she couldn't win either. Ethan woke with the first rays of sunlight streaming through his window. Despite the tension from the night before, hope flickered in his chest. Today they would leave this place, get away from his family's judgment and cruelty. He and Naomi could start fresh, just the two of them. He showered quickly and dressed, eager to see her, to apologize for not defending her more strongly, to promise things would be different from now on. Walking down the hallway to her room, he rehearsed what he would say. How he'd make everything right. Ethan knocked softly. "Naomi, you awake?" No answer. He knocked again, a little louder. "Naomi, it's me." Still nothing. Maybe she was in the shower and couldn't hear him. Or maybe she was still asleep after a restless night. "I'm coming in, okay?" he called, then slowly opened the door. The room was empty. Bed neatly made. Closet door open, showing bare hangers. And on the pillow a folded piece of paper. Something cold and heavy settled in Ethan's stomach as he crossed the room. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the note. As he read Naomi's words, the cold spread through his entire body. She was gone. She'd left him. "No," he whispered, reading the note again. "No, no, no." He rushed to the window. The driveway was empty except for the family's cars. How long ago had she left? Where had she gone? Panic rising in his throat, Ethan ran from the room, taking the grand staircase 2 steps at a time. He burst into the kitchen, startling a maid who was preparing breakfast. "Mr. Whitmore," she gasped, nearly dropping a tray of pastries. "Have you seen Naomi?" "Miss Carter," Ethan demanded, not caring how wild he looked. The maid's eyes darted nervously. "The young lady, I believe she left, sir." "When?" "How?" "Very early, sir. Before dawn. I was just coming on duty and saw her waiting by the gates." The maid hesitated. "She had a suitcase. Did she say where she was going?" Ethan pressed. "No, sir. But she got into a car. One of those ride services, I think." Ethan ran his hands through his hair, trying to think clearly through the panic. She couldn't have gone far. Maybe back to her apartment in the city. He had to find her. He rushed back upstairs to get his phone and keys, nearly colliding with Sophie in the hallway. "Whoa, where's the fire?" she asked, smirking. "Not now, Sophie," Ethan growled, trying to push past her. She blocked his path. "Looking for your girlfriend?" "I'm afraid she's flown the coop." Ethan froze. "You knew she was leaving?" Sophie examined her nails. "I might have seen her sneaking out at the crack of dawn, suitcase in hand, looking like a thief in the night, and you didn't wake me." Anger replaced panic, hot and sharp. "You didn't think to tell me?" "Why would I?" Sophie shrugged. "She obviously didn't want you to know. Besides, it's for the best. She doesn't belong here, Ethan. You know that as well as I do." Something snapped inside him. Years of keeping the peace, of swallowing his true feelings to maintain family harmony. It all crumbled in an instant. "You did this," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You and Mother. You couldn't stand seeing me happy with someone who didn't fit your narrow little world." Sophie's smirk faltered. "Don't be dramatic. She left on her own. Maybe she finally realized she was out of her league. Or maybe she got tired of being treated like she was less than human," Ethan shot back. "By my own family. The people who are supposed to love and support me." "We do love and support you," Sophie protested. "We're trying to protect you from making a huge mistake. The only mistake I made was bringing Naomi here. I should have known better than to expose her to people like you." Sophie's face hardened. "People like me? I'm your sister." "Then act like it," Ethan said. "A real sister would want me to be happy, not sabotage the best thing that's ever happened to me." He pushed past her, no longer interested in anything she had to say. He needed to find Naomi, and every minute that passed made that harder. Downstairs, he found his parents in the dining room, drinking coffee and reading the morning paper, as if nothing had happened. As if they hadn't driven away the woman he loved. "Ethan," his mother said, looking up with a plastic smile. "You're up early. Coffee?" "Naomi's gone," he said flatly. Margaret set down her cup with practiced calm. "Is she? Well, perhaps it's for the—" "Don't," Ethan cut her off. "Don't you dare say it's for the best." Charles lowered his newspaper, frowning. "Watch your tone, son." "No, I don't think I will," Ethan replied, anger building like a storm. "Not anymore." "Not after what you've done." Margaret's face hardened. What we've done is try to protect this family, our legacy, your future, by threatening to disown me, by treating Naomi like she's beneath you." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Some protection. We merely showed her the reality of our world," Margaret said coldly. "If she couldn't handle it, she handled it beautifully," Ethan interrupted. "With more grace and dignity than anyone in this house. What she couldn't handle was watching me get torn apart by my own family's ultimatums." Charles set his paper down completely, his expression unreadable. "So she left to spare you that choice. Interesting." Something in his father's tone made Ethan pause. "What do you mean?" Charles glanced at Margaret, then back to his son. "It suggests she loves you enough to put your relationship with your family above her own happiness. That's not insignificant." Margaret shot her husband a warning look. "Charles, what?" Charles shrugged. "I'm merely observing that her actions show character." Ethan stared at his father, surprised by this unexpected assessment. "She does have character, more than you gave her credit for." "Perhaps," Charles agreed quietly. "This is ridiculous," Margaret snapped. "The girl is gone." Problem solved. She reached for Ethan's hand. "Darling, in a few weeks you'll see this was all for the best. We can introduce you to some lovely young women from suitable families." Ethan yanked his hand away. "Stop, just stop. I don't want anyone else. I want Naomi." "You hardly know her," Margaret argued. "I know her better than you think. And I love her." Ethan looked from his mother to his father. "I'm going to find her. And when I do, I'm going to beg her to give me another chance. To give us another chance." Margaret's face paled. "Don't be foolish. Think about what you'd be giving up." "I am thinking about it," Ethan said firmly, "and I don't care. The money, the position, the so-called legacy, none of it matters without her." "You don't mean that," Margaret said, her voice rising. "You're upset right now, but you'll come to your senses." "No, Mother. I'm finally coming to my senses." Ethan took a deep breath. "I'm leaving. Don't try to stop me." As he turned to go, Charles called after him. "Ethan, wait." Ethan paused, looking back at his father. "When you find her," Charles said carefully, "tell her I said goodbye and that I wish things had been different." Margaret gasped. "Charles, don't encourage this madness." But Ethan saw something in his father's eyes, regret perhaps, or understanding. He nodded once, then left the room without another word. In the grand foyer, he nearly ran into Daniel, who was just coming through the front doors. "Whoa!" Daniel said, steadying his friend. "What's going on? You look like you're about to murder someone." "Naomi's gone," Ethan said, the words still painful to speak aloud. "She left before dawn." Daniel's face fell. "Damn, I was afraid something like this might happen." He sighed. "She's at the Riverside Inn in town. Room 212, Ethan stared at him. "How do you know that?" "Because she called me an hour ago, asking if I could bring her suitcase to the train station later today." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Apparently she's planning to go back to the city this afternoon." Relief washed over Ethan. She was still nearby. "He still had a chance, thank you," he said, already moving toward the door. "I owe you." "Ethan, wait," Daniel called, stopping him. "Before you rush off, what's your plan here?" "Plan?" Ethan blinked. "To find her, to bring her back. And then what?" Daniel pressed. "Your family made their position pretty clear. Are you ready to deal with the fallout if you choose her?" The question hung in the air between them. It was the same choice Naomi had tried to spare him from making. "I already have," Ethan said firmly. "I choose her." Daniel studied him for a long moment. "You sure about that?" "Because from where I'm standing, you didn't exactly fight for her while she was here." The words stung because they were true. "I know," Ethan admitted. "I messed up. I was trying to keep the peace, to get through the weekend without everything exploding." He ran a hand through his hair. "But all I did was show Naomi that I wasn't strong enough to stand up for her. For us. And now I am," Ethan said, conviction growing with each word. "I just told my parents I don't care about the money or the legacy or any of it. I meant it." Daniel's serious expression finally cracked into a smile. "Well, it's about damn time." He clapped Ethan on the shoulder. "Go get her." "But Ethan, what?" "Don't lead with grand promises about giving everything up for her. That'll just make her feel worse." Daniel's eyes were kind but direct. "Lead with the truth, that you love her, that you were afraid, and that you're not afraid anymore." Ethan nodded, grateful for the advice. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." "Don't thank me yet," Daniel replied. "So you still have to convince her you mean it this time." As Ethan rushed to his car, his mind raced with everything he wanted to say to Naomi. How sorry he was. How much he loved her. How he was ready to fight for them. No matter the cost, he just hoped she would listen. In room 212 of the Riverside Inn, a modest place with faded wallpaper and worn carpet, Naomi sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone in her hands. She'd already called Daniel, asking for help getting to the train station later. Now she was trying to work up the courage to call her parents. What would she tell them? That Ethan's family had hated her on sight, that she'd run away rather than face another day of their thinly veiled contempt? She set the phone down, too exhausted to make the call. She hadn't slept at all, first packing and sneaking out of the mansion before dawn, then sitting in this small, stuffy room while her mind replayed every painful moment of the weekend. Sophie's cruel words. Margaret's cold stare. The whispers and stares from family friends, and Ethan's face when she'd questioned his commitment. The hurt in his eyes. The way he'd promised to choose her, even as doubt flickered across his features. Naomi picked up the note she'd been writing, a longer, more detailed goodbye than the hasty one she'd left at the mansion. This one explained everything. Her fears, her reasons, her broken heart. Tears blurred her vision as she read over what she'd written. Was she doing the right thing? Or was she giving up too easily, running away from the fight? No, she told herself firmly. This wasn't about giving up. It was about being realistic. About protecting both of them from a relationship that would cost too much. Ethan would be angry at first, hurt, but eventually he'd see she was right. He'd go back to his world of wealth and privilege, marry someone his parents approved of, and live the life he was born to. Maybe he'd think of her sometimes, the teacher from Oak Park who'd almost made him throw it all away, and she would go back to her own life. Her small apartment, her classroom full of third graders, her friends who didn't care about designer labels or family legacies. She would heal eventually. The pain would fade. At least that's what she kept telling herself as tears dripped onto the page. A sharp knock at the door made her jump, heart suddenly racing. Had Daniel come earlier than they'd planned? Wiping her eyes quickly, Naomi went to the door. "Who is it?" "It's me," Ethan's voice called, sending a shock through her system. "Naomi, please open the door." She froze, torn between longing and fear. How had he found her? What was he doing here? "Naomi," he called again, softer now. "I know you're in there, please." Slowly she opened the door. Ethan stood in the hallway, hair disheveled, eyes red-rimmed like he'd been crying too. The sight of him sent pain lancing through her chest. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "You left," he said simply, as if that explained everything. "You left without saying goodbye." "I left a note." "A note isn't the same as goodbye." His eyes searched hers. "Can I come in, please?" After a moment's hesitation, Naomi stepped back, letting him enter the small room. She was suddenly conscious of how different it was from his family's mansion. The faded floral bedspread, the ancient TV, the water stain on the ceiling. "How did you find me?" she asked, wrapping her arms around herself. "Daniel told me where you were." Ethan stood awkwardly by the door, hands in his pockets. "He said you called him about your suitcase." Naomi nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Seeing Ethan again, here now, made all her carefully constructed reasons for leaving seem flimsy and small. "Why did you go?" he asked quietly. "You know why," she replied. "I told you in the note. You said you couldn't be the reason I lose my family." Ethan took a step closer. "But that should be my choice to make, not yours." Naomi shook her head. "It's not that simple, Ethan." "It is that simple," he insisted. "I love you. I want to be with you. Everything else is just details." "Details?" Naomi laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Your mother threatening to disown you isn't a detail. Your sister's cruelty isn't a detail. The way everyone looked at us, at me, that's not a detail." "You're right," Ethan conceded. "I'm sorry. That was the wrong word." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration clear on his face. "But Naomi, don't you see? By leaving, you're letting them win." The accusation stung. "This isn't about winning or losing, Ethan. It's about being realistic." "Realistic about what?" "About us!" Naomi cried, the emotion she'd been holding back finally breaking through. "About the fact that we come from completely different worlds. That your family will never accept me." That sooner or later, you'll resent me for costing you everything you've ever known. Ethan's face softened. Is that what you think? That I'd resent you? Wouldn't you? She asked quietly. Maybe not right away, but eventually, when the excitement fades and real life sets in. Wouldn't you look at me and see everything you gave up? He moved closer, stopping just short of touching her. No, he said firmly. I'd look at you and see everything I gained. Naomi closed her eyes, his words both beautiful and painful. You say that now. I mean it now, Ethan said, his voice gaining strength. And I'll mean it tomorrow and next year and 50 years from now. How can you be so sure? She whispered. Because I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He reached for her hands, holding them gently in his. Naomi, listen to me. I messed up this weekend. I should have defended you more. I should have stood up to my family right from the start. Ethan, no, let me finish, he insisted. I was trying to keep the peace, to get through the weekend without everything falling apart. But all I did was show you that I wasn't brave enough to fight for us when it mattered. His eyes shone with unshed tears. I'm so sorry for that. Naomi felt her resolve weakening. It's not just about you standing up to them. It's about the life we'd have afterward. The consequences. I don't care about the consequences, Ethan said. I went back to the mansion this morning and told my parents exactly that. I told them I choose you, with or without their approval. With or without their money. Shock rippled through her. You did what? I told them the truth, Ethan said simply, that I love you. That none of their threats or disapproval changes that. But your inheritance means nothing without you. He squeezed her hands gently. I'd rather live in a tiny apartment and work a regular job with you than live in that mansion alone. The sincerity in his voice made her heart ache. You don't know what you're saying. You've never lived without money, without privilege. Then I'll learn, he said, determination clear in his eyes. We'll learn together. Naomi pulled her hands free, needing space to think clearly. Ethan, I can't let you throw away your whole life for me. You're not letting me do anything, he replied. This is my choice. My decision. His voice softened. And it's the easiest decision I've ever made. What about your parents? Your sister? Pain flashed across his face. I hope someday they'll come around. But if they don't... He took a deep breath. If they don't, then that's their loss. Not mine. Naomi sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed. This was everything she'd wanted to hear. Ethan choosing her, fighting for them, standing up to his family. So why was she still afraid? What if it doesn't work? She asked quietly. What if we try and it's too hard and we end up hating each other? Ethan knelt in front of her, looking up into her eyes. Then at least we'll know we tried. That we didn't give up at the first sign of trouble. This is more than a sign of trouble, Naomi pointed out. It's your entire family against us. Not my entire family, Ethan corrected her. My father actually told me to say goodbye to you, and that he wished things had been different. Surprise flickered through her. Your father said that? Ethan nodded. I think you impressed him with your toast at brunch. With your dignity despite everything they threw at you. A tiny spark of hope ignited in Naomi's chest, but she tried to smother it. Hope was dangerous right now. Even if your father comes around, she said carefully, it doesn't change the fundamental problem. You'd still be choosing between your family and me. I don't want to be that choice, Ethan, but you already are, he said gently. Not because you did anything wrong, but because my mother and sister forced this issue. And now that it's been forced, he took her hands again. I'm choosing you, Naomi. I'm all in. Tears filled her eyes again. I'm scared, she admitted, finally voicing the feeling that had been driving her since she'd overheard Margaret's threat. I'm scared of ruining your life, of not being enough to make up for everything you'd lose. Ethan rose from his knees to sit beside her on the bed. You're not ruining my life, he said softly. You're saving it. What do you mean? Before I met you, I was just going through the motions, he explained. Working at my father's company because it was expected. Living the life that was planned for me. Never really questioning any of it. He turned to face her fully. You woke me up, Naomi. You made me see that I was letting other people decide my life for me. His words touched something deep inside her. I did? You did, Ethan confirmed. Remember when Sophie mentioned my photography? How I gave it up because my parents didn't approve. Naomi nodded. That was just one of many times I chose the path of least resistance, he continued. So I told myself some battles weren't worth fighting. But the truth is, I was just afraid. Afraid of disappointing them. Afraid of standing on my own. His eyes, so blue and earnest, held hers. I don't want to be afraid anymore. The conviction in his voice made her breath catch. This was a different Ethan than the one who had tried to smooth things over at the mansion. Stronger, more certain. "What do you want?" she asked softly. "I want you," he said without hesitation. "I want us. Whatever that looks like, whatever we have to face. I want to build a life with you, Naomi." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "And if that means starting over, without your family's support, then we start over," Ethan said simply. Together. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. Opening his palm, he showed her a simple silver key. "What's that?" Naomi asked. "The key to my apartment in the city," Ethan explained. "Not the one my parents bought me. A new one I've been looking at. It's smaller, in a different neighborhood, but it's mine. Or it could be ours if you want." Naomi stared at the key, understanding dawning slowly. "You've been planning this? To move out?" Ethan nodded. "For a couple of months now. I wasn't happy with the way my life was going. Meeting you just made me more certain I needed a change." He placed the key in her hand, closing her fingers around it. "This is me choosing my own path, with or without my family's approval. I was going to tell you after this weekend." Tears spilled onto Naomi's cheeks. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "I wanted to be sure I could do it," he admitted. "That I wasn't just talking big. The lease is signed. The deposit paid." He smiled slightly. "It's not fancy. Nothing like what you saw this weekend. But it's a start. Our start, if you want it to be." The key felt warm in Naomi's palm. A symbol of everything Ethan was offering. A new beginning. A life they would build together on their own terms. "Ethan," she whispered, overwhelmed by the gesture. "I'm not asking you to move in right away," he added quickly. "I know that's a big step. I'm just showing you that I'm serious about this. About us." Naomi looked at him, really looked at him. The sincerity in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders as he waited for her response. The love written so clearly across his face. She'd been ready to walk away from all of that. To give up without fighting for what they had. "I'm sorry I left without saying goodbye," she said softly. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "I know," Ethan replied. "You were trying to protect me, to spare me a difficult choice." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather light. "But Naomi, you're worth choosing. Worth fighting for. Worth any sacrifice." The last of her resistance crumbled under the weight of his words. Of the love behind them. "I love you," she said simply. "I never stopped, not even when I was walking away." Hope bloomed in Ethan's eyes. "Does that mean you'll give us another chance?" Instead of answering, Naomi leaned forward and kissed him softly. When she pulled back, they were both trembling. "Is that a yes?" Ethan whispered, a smile starting to form. Naomi nodded, her own smile breaking through tears. "Yes, but Ethan, we need to be sure about this, about what we're facing." "I am sure," he said firmly. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." He pulled her close, holding her as if afraid she might disappear again. Naomi melted into his embrace, the fear and doubt that had driven her away beginning to fade. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more battles ahead, with his family, with society, with their own doubts and fears. But in Ethan's arms, in this small, modest room so far removed from the grandeur of his family's mansion, Naomi finally believed they might be strong enough to face them all. Together. "So," she said after a long moment, pulling back to look at him, "what happens now?" Ethan smiled, hope and determination shining in his eyes. "Now we write our own story. Not the one my family wants. Not the one the world expects. Ours." Naomi smiled back, feeling truly hopeful for the first time since they'd arrived at the Whitmore mansion. "I like the sound of that." Outside, rain began to fall, pattering softly against the window. But inside room 212, warmth bloomed like the first flower of spring after a long, hard winter. A new beginning, their beginning. The rain fell harder as Ethan and Naomi sat side by side on the small bed, talking softly about everything that had happened and what might come next. "We should probably get going," Ethan said eventually, glancing at his watch. "Checkout is at 11. Naomi nodded, though a part of her wanted to stay in this safe little bubble they'd created. "Where are we going?" Ethan squeezed her hand. "I was thinking we could go get some lunch in town. Then head back to the city. See that apartment I told you about? That sounds nice, Naomi said, but hesitated. What about your things at the mansion? Ethan's expression hardened. I'll have Daniel grab what I need. I don't want to go back there right now. Ethan, Naomi took a deep breath. I think we should go back. His eyebrows shot up. What? Why? Because running away doesn't solve anything, she said quietly. We'd just be letting your family's judgment win. Letting them scare us off. You're the one who left this morning, Ethan pointed out gently. I know. And it was wrong, Naomi admitted. I was trying to make things easier, but all I did was avoid the hard part. She turned to face him fully. If we're really going to do this, be together, fight for us, then we need to start by standing our ground. Ethan looked uncertain. You really want to go back there? After everything they said and did? No, I don't want to, Naomi said honestly. The thought of facing your mother again makes my stomach hurt. But I think we need to. For us, pride flashed in Ethan's eyes. You're incredible, you know that. I'm scared, she admitted. But we can't start our future by running away from the past. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. You're right, but we do it on our terms this time, together. His jaw set with determination. And if anyone, my mother, Sophie, anyone, says one unkind word to you, we leave immediately. Deal, Naomi agreed, though anxiety fluttered in her chest at the thought of returning to the mansion. They checked out of the inn, walking through the rain to Ethan's car. The town was small but charming, with old brick buildings and hanging flower baskets swaying in the wind. In different circumstances, it might have been a romantic getaway. As they drove toward the Whitmore estate, Naomi watched the scenery change from quaint shops to sprawling fields, to the manicured grounds that surrounded the mansion. With each mile, her nerves grew tighter. We can still turn around, Ethan said, noticing her tension. Naomi shook her head. No, we need to do this. The gates loomed ahead, iron and imposing. The guard recognized Ethan immediately and waved them through with a curious glance at Naomi. The mansion looked different in the rain, less impressive, more cold. Water streamed down the stone facades and dripped from the gargoyles that perched on the corners. Ethan parked at the foot of the steps. For a moment they both sat in silence, rain drumming on the roof. Ready? He asked. Naomi took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. They made a dash through the rain up the marble steps to the covered entryway. Ethan pushed open the massive front doors, and they stepped into the grand foyer, slightly damp but determined. A maid appeared, eyes widening at the sight of Naomi. Mr. Whitmore! Miss Carter! You're back? Yes, Ethan said firmly. Where is everyone? In the main salon, sir. There are guests. The maid glanced nervously between them. Guests. Ethan frowned. What guests? The maid fidgeted with her apron. The Harringtons and the Blakes. Mrs. Whitmore invited them for lunch. Ethan looked at Naomi. The Harringtons have a daughter my age, he explained quietly. Caroline. My mother's been trying to set us up for years. Understanding dawned on Naomi. Margaret hadn't wasted any time trying to replace her. We don't have to do this now, Ethan said. We can wait until they're gone. But Naomi straightened her shoulders. No, let's get it over with. Hand in hand, they walked toward the main salon. Naomi could hear laughter and conversation as they approached. She squeezed Ethan's hand tighter, drawing strength from his touch. They paused at the doorway, taking in the scene. Margaret sat in a high-backed chair, holding court with several well-dressed guests. Charles stood by the fireplace, looking bored. Sophie lounged on a sofa beside a pretty blonde woman around Ethan's age. Caroline Harrington, Naomi guessed. It was Daniel who noticed them first. His eyes widened, then he broke into a broad grin. Look who's back, he called, causing every head to turn. The room fell silent. Margaret's face drained of color. Sophie sat up straight, her mouth hanging open. Charles's expression was harder to read, surprise mixed with something that might have been respect. Caroline Harrington looked between Ethan and Naomi, confusion written across her perfect features. Ethan stepped forward, still holding Naomi's hand. Sorry to interrupt, he said, not sounding sorry at all. We just came to pick up my things. Margaret stood, smoothing her skirt with shaking hands. Ethan, we didn't expect you back so soon. Her eyes darted to Naomi. And with company. This is still my girlfriend, Naomi Carter, Ethan said, his voice carrying across the silent room. In case anyone was confused about that, Sophie made a small, disgusted sound. Caroline looked down at her hands, clearly uncomfortable. Charles cleared his throat. "Welcome back, son. Miss Carter." Before Margaret could say anything else, Ethan continued, "We're not staying long. Just grabbing what I need and then we're leaving." He looked around the room. "For good." A murmur ran through the guests. Margaret's face flushed with embarrassment. "Ethan," she hissed, "this is hardly the time or place—" "It's exactly the time and place," Ethan interrupted. "I want everyone to understand exactly where things stand." He pulled Naomi closer to his side. "I love Naomi. I choose to be with her. And if that means I'm no longer welcome in this house, then so be it." The silence that followed was deafening. Naomi could feel every eye on her, some curious, some pitying, some hostile. To everyone's surprise, it was Charles who broke the silence. He set down his drink and crossed the room to stand before them. "Miss Carter," he said formally, "I believe I owe you an apology." Margaret gasped. "Charles." He silenced her with a look, then turned back to Naomi. "Your toast yesterday about family values, it made me think. About what kind of family we've been. What kind of father I've been." He glanced at Ethan. "Not a very good one, I'm afraid." Naomi didn't know how to respond. She'd never expected this from Charles Whitmore. Charles continued, "I've spent my life building wealth and status, protecting the Whitmore name, but somewhere along the way I forgot what really matters." He looked Naomi directly in the eyes. "You reminded me, and for that I thank you." The room was so quiet Naomi could hear the rain against the windows. Every guest seemed frozen in place, afraid to even breathe. "Father," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion, "what are you saying?" Charles turned to his son. "I'm saying that if this young woman is your choice, truly your choice, then you have my blessing." "Charles," Margaret snapped. "Have you lost your mind?" Charles faced his wife, standing taller than Naomi had seen before. "No, Margaret. For the first time in years, I'm thinking clearly." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Our son loves this woman, and from what I've seen, she loves him too. That should be enough for us." Sophie jumped to her feet. "Dad, you can't be serious." "She's—" "Careful, Sophie," Charles warned. "Think very carefully about what you're about to say." Sophie's mouth snapped shut, but her eyes blazed with anger. Naomi felt like she was in a dream. Of all the ways she'd imagined this moment, Charles Whitmore defending her had never crossed her mind. Margaret rose from her chair, her movements stiff with fury. "I will not stand by and watch this family be torn apart by what, Mother?" Ethan challenged. "By me falling in love with someone who doesn't fit your narrow view of acceptable." "Someone who makes me happy? She'll never belong in our world," Margaret hissed. "Then maybe it's time I found a new world," Ethan replied calmly. Charles put a hand on his son's shoulder. "Ethan, listen. No one's saying you need to leave the family or give up your inheritance." "I'm prepared to," Ethan said firmly. "I know. And that's how I know this is real." Charles glanced at Naomi, but it shouldn't come to that. Margaret's face had gone from white to red. "I cannot believe what I'm hearing." "In front of our friends, no less." "Our friends," Charles said mildly, "have known us long enough to understand that families sometimes have disagreements, and that those disagreements can be resolved with love and respect." He turned to face the awkwardly silent guests. "I apologize for the drama. You came for lunch, not a family therapy session." He smiled more warmly than Naomi had seen before. "But while you're here, I'd like to properly introduce you to Naomi Carter, the woman who has captured my son's heart." Margaret looked like she might explode. Sophie stormed out of the room without another word. Caroline Harrington studied her manicure intently, but a few of the guests rose, moving cautiously toward Naomi and Ethan. "It's lovely to meet you properly." "Miss Carter," an older gentleman said, extending his hand. "I'm Robert Blake. I quite enjoyed your toast yesterday." His wife joined him. Yes, it was refreshing to hear someone speak from the heart in this house. One by one, several guests approached, introducing themselves with varying degrees of sincerity. Not everyone came forward. Some stayed firmly in Margaret's corner, eyeing Naomi with thinly veiled disapproval. But enough made the effort that Naomi felt a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe the world wouldn't be as harshly divided as she'd feared. Margaret, seeing the tide turning, did what any skilled socialite would do. She put on a mask of civility. "Well," she said, her voice brittle as glass, "since you're both here, you might as well join us for lunch. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't acceptance. But it was a step back from open hostility. Ethan looked at Naomi, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly. "Thank you, Mother," he said. "We'd be happy to stay for lunch." The meal that followed was strained but not openly hostile. Margaret barely spoke to Naomi, addressing all her comments to Ethan or the other guests. Sophie didn't return at all. But Charles made a point of asking Naomi questions about her teaching, her hobbies, her family, treating her like a real person for the first time. Daniel kept the conversation flowing when it threatened to stall, his easy humor relieving the tension. By dessert, some of the guests were even smiling at Naomi's stories about her third-grade classroom. When lunch finally ended and the guests began to leave, Ethan pulled Naomi aside. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "You've been amazing through all of this." "I'm okay," she said, and meant it. "Your father surprised me." Ethan nodded. "Me too. I've never seen him stand up to my mother like that." "Do you think she'll ever come around?" Naomi asked. Ethan sighed. "Honestly? I don't know, maybe eventually." He kissed her forehead. "But I meant what I said before, it doesn't matter. I choose you with or without her approval." Charles approached them, hands in his pockets. "Miss Carter, Naomi, may I have a word in private?" Ethan looked wary. "Father—" "It's okay," Naomi assured him. "I'll be right back." She followed Charles into his study, the same room where Margaret had threatened to disown Ethan just yesterday, but it felt different now with just the two of them. "Please sit," Charles said, gesturing to a leather chair. Naomi sat back straight, chin up. Whatever Charles Whitmore had to say, she would face it with dignity. "First, let me apologize again," Charles began, taking the chair opposite her, "for my wife's behavior. For my own failure to step in sooner." "Thank you," Naomi said simply. Charles studied her for a moment. "You're good for him, you know, Ethan." "I love him," she replied. "I can see that." Charles leaned forward. "He's always been different from the rest of us. More idealistic. Less concerned with appearances and traditions." A small smile touched his lips. "When he was 10, he brought home an injured bird, spent weeks nursing it back to health, even when Margaret said it would die and he should just let it go." Naomi smiled at the image of a young Ethan caring for a wounded bird. "He's got a good heart," Charles continued. "But he's also been afraid. Afraid of disappointing us, afraid of striking out on his own." His eyes met Naomi's. "Until he met you." "I didn't do anything special," Naomi protested. "You loved him for himself, not his name or his bank account," Charles said. "That's rarer than you might think in our world." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small leather box. "I want you to have this," he said, sliding it across to her. Confused, Naomi opened it. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with small sapphires. "It belonged to my mother," Charles explained. "Not the family jewels, those are all locked away in the vault. This was her personal favorite. She wore it every day." "Mr. Whitmore, I can't accept this," Naomi said, stunned by the gesture. "Charles, please." He smiled. "And yes, you can. Consider it a peace offering. A welcome to the family, even if some family members aren't ready to give that welcome yet." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "This means a lot to me." "Just make him happy," Charles said simply. "That's all I ask." When Naomi returned to Ethan's side, she was wearing the bracelet. His eyes widened when he noticed it. "Is that your grandmother's?" she confirmed. "Your father gave it to me." Ethan shook his head in disbelief. "He must really like you. He never shares the family heirlooms with anyone." "He said it wasn't one of the important ones," Naomi said. Ethan laughed. "Don't believe that for a second. That bracelet was his mother's favorite. He's told me the story a dozen times." Warmth spread through Naomi's chest. Maybe there was hope after all, at least with Charles. They found Margaret in the garden room arranging flowers with precise, angry movements. "Mother," Ethan said. "We're leaving now." Margaret didn't look up. "I assume you'll be taking more than just a suitcase." "Just clothes and some personal things," Ethan replied. "Everything else stays." That made her look up. "What do you mean?" "I mean I don't want the cars, the artwork, the trust fund money, any of it." Ethan's voice was calm but firm. "I'm going to make my own way." Margaret snipped a rose stem with unnecessary force. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't survive without—" "Yes, I can," Ethan interrupted. "People do it every day. Get jobs, pay bills, live within their means. You have no idea what you're talking about, Margaret scoffed. You've never worked a real job in your life. Then it's time I learned, Ethan said simply. Naomi watched the exchange with a mixture of pride and concern. Ethan was giving up so much for her. Could she really let him do that? Mrs. Whitmore, she said quietly, I know you think I'm all wrong for your son, that I'll never fit into your world. Margaret's eyes were cold. At least we agree on something. The thing is, Naomi continued, undeterred, I don't need to fit into your world. Ethan and I can build our own. She took Ethan's hand. One where what matters isn't how much money you have or who your family is, but how you treat people, how much love you give. How poetic, Margaret said dryly, and utterly naive. Maybe, Naomi conceded. But I'd rather be naive and happy than sophisticated and bitter. Margaret's eyes narrowed at the implied criticism. Come on, Ethan said, tugging Naomi's hand. Let's go pack my things. But as they turned to leave, Margaret spoke again. That bracelet, she said sharply. Where did you get it? Naomi glanced down at her wrist. Mr. Whitmore gave it to me. Charles. Margaret looked stunned. He gave you my mother-in-law's bracelet? He said it was a welcome to the family, Naomi replied, watching Margaret's face carefully. For just a moment, something cracked in Margaret's perfect facade. Something like hurt flashed in her eyes. I see, she said softly. Then the mask slipped back into place. Well, you've certainly managed to charm the Whitmore men. Congratulations. Without another word, she turned back to her flowers, effectively dismissing them. Upstairs, Ethan packed quickly, clothes, books, a few photographs. Naomi noticed he took special care with an old camera, wrapping it in a soft cloth before placing it in his bag. Your photography equipment? She asked. He nodded. Maybe I'll pick it up again. See if I still have the eye for it. I'd love to see your work sometime, Naomi said. Ethan smiled. I'd like that. When they were finished, Daniel helped them carry the bags to the car. You sure about this? He asked Ethan. Cutting ties with the family business? I'm sure about her, Ethan replied, looking at Naomi. The rest we'll figure out. Daniel clapped him on the shoulder. Well, if you need anything, job leads, references, someone to have a beer with when reality sets in, I'm here. Thanks, Ethan said, giving his friend a quick hug. For everything. As they prepared to leave, Charles came out to the driveway. Ethan, wait. Ethan turned, wary but receptive. Yes, Father? Your photography, Charles said, looking slightly uncomfortable. You were good at it. Really good. Ethan blinked, surprised by the compliment. Thanks. I know a few people in the industry, Charles continued. If you wanted to pursue it professionally, I could make some calls. Not to get you special treatment, he added quickly. Just introductions. The rest would be up to you. Ethan stared at his father. You'd do that, even after I just walked away from the company. You're my son, Charles said simply. Your happiness matters more to me than the company. It took me too long to realize that, but I'm trying to make up for lost time. Emotion flickered across Ethan's face. I'd appreciate those introductions, he said softly. Thank you. Charles nodded, then turned to Naomi. Take care of each other, he said. And don't be strangers. This is still Ethan's home, whenever he wants it to be. And yours too, Naomi. As they drove away from the mansion, Naomi glanced back through the rear window. Charles still stood in the driveway watching them go, and beside him, surprising both of them, was Margaret, her face unreadable from this distance. Do you think your mother will ever forgive me? Naomi asked. Ethan sighed. My mother doesn't forgive easily, but she does love me in her own controlling way. He reached for Naomi's hand. Give her time. Maybe she'll surprise us? Like your father did, Naomi said, touching the bracelet on her wrist. Exactly. Ethan squeezed her fingers. But even if she doesn't, we'll be okay. Naomi believed him. Whatever came next, whether acceptance or continued resistance from his family, whether wealth or modest means, whether easy times or hard, they would face it together. The city appeared on the horizon, its skyline piercing the clouds. Their future waited there, uncertain but full of possibility. Ready for the next chapter? Ethan asked as the first buildings rose around them. Naomi smiled. With you? Always. 3 months later, Naomi stood in the middle of a small but bright living room, arranging flowers in a simple glass vase. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the apartment she now shared with Ethan, not his family's luxurious penthouse, but a cozy two-bedroom in a diverse neighborhood they'd both fallen in love with. Photos lined the walls, some taken by Ethan, who was rediscovering his passion for photography with encouraging success. He'd gotten a job at a small studio, learning the business side while building his portfolio. The pay was modest compared to what he'd earned at his father's company. But the satisfaction in his eyes when he talked about his work was worth every penny they didn't have. Naomi was still teaching 3rd grade, but she'd started a photography club for her students, inspired by Ethan's renewed enthusiasm. Watching the children discover the world through a camera lens brought her joy she hadn't anticipated. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Wiping her hands on her jeans, Naomi went to answer it. Charles Whitmore stood in the hallway looking slightly out of place in his expensive suit. Behind him, to Naomi's shock, was Margaret clutching a small gift bag. "Mr. Whitmore." "Mrs. Whitmore." Naomi stepped back, opening the door wider. "Please come in. Ethan's just finishing up a call for work." Charles entered with easy confidence, but Margaret hesitated, looking around with barely concealed curiosity. "It's cozy," she said, which from her was almost a compliment. "Thank you," Naomi replied. "We like it." An awkward silence fell. Naomi was about to offer them something to drink when Ethan emerged from the bedroom. "Dad, I didn't know you were coming by." His eyes widened when he saw his mother. "Mom, this is a surprise." Margaret shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, well, your father mentioned he was visiting, and I thought..." She held out the gift bag, a housewarming present. "Nothing special." Naomi accepted the bag with a grateful smile. Inside was a set of fine crystal wine glasses, the kind that would have been standard in the Whitmore mansion, but were definitely a luxury in their modest apartment. "They're beautiful," she said sincerely. "Thank you," Margaret nodded stiffly. Every home should have proper glassware. It wasn't exactly a warm embrace. But coming from Margaret Whitmore, it was a peace offering of sorts. "How about we try them out?" Ethan suggested, sensing an opportunity. "Dad brought wine last time he visited. We still have a bottle." As Ethan went to get the wine, Charles moved to the window, admiring the view of the small park across the street. "Not the skyline view you're used to," Naomi said, joining him. Charles smiled. "Sometimes a change in perspective is exactly what we need." He glanced at her. "Ethan seems happy." "Happier than I've seen him in years." "I hope so," Naomi said. "I'm trying my best." "It's not just you, though. That's a big part of it." Charles lowered his voice. "It's seeing what he's capable of on his own. Building something from scratch instead of inheriting it ready-made." Across the room, Ethan was showing Margaret his latest photographs, explaining his techniques with enthusiasm. To Naomi's surprise, Margaret seemed genuinely interested, asking questions and even smiling once or twice. "She's trying," Charles said, following Naomi's gaze. "In her own way." "I know," Naomi replied, "and I appreciate it." When they all gathered around the small dining table, glasses of wine in hand, Charles raised his in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said warmly. "And to the family we choose as well as the family we're born to." "To family," everyone echoed. Even Margaret, as they clinked their glasses, crystal meeting crystal with a clear, bright sound. Naomi looked around the table, at Ethan, whose eyes shone with a happiness that had nothing to do with wealth or status. At Charles, who had found the courage to support his son's choices. Even at Margaret, who was taking small but significant steps toward acceptance. This wasn't the fairy tale ending she'd imagined as a little girl. It was messier, more complicated, more real, and infinitely more precious because of it. Later that night, after Ethan's parents had left and they were alone again, Naomi curled up beside him on their second-hand sofa. "That went better than expected," she said, her head on his shoulder. "Much better," Ethan agreed. "I think my mother might actually be coming around." "Miracles do happen," Naomi said with a small smile. Ethan pulled her closer. "Speaking of miracles, have I told you today how much I love you? How grateful I am that you didn't give up on us, even when I gave you every reason to." "Only twice," Naomi teased. "You're slacking," he laughed, the sound warm and free. "I love you, Naomi Carter, more than I ever thought possible." His face grew serious. "When you left that morning at the mansion, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. And instead I found everything that really matters." Ethan kissed her softly. "This life we're building, It's not as fancy as what I grew up with, but it's ours, and it's real." Naomi nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Their home wasn't a mansion. Their furniture wasn't antique. Their future wasn't guaranteed by trust funds or family connections. But they had something more valuable. Love freely given, choices made together. A life shaped by their own hands rather than someone else's expectations. "I wouldn't trade it for all the mansions in the world," she whispered. Outside their window, the city hummed with life. Inside, in the warm circle of Ethan's arms, Naomi knew they'd found where they truly belonged, not in his world or hers, but in the one they were creating together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one love strong enough to overcome all barriers, bridge all divides, and build something beautiful from the ground up.